Today, when we walk into a museum, we usually ask one question. Do I like this painting? We stand in front of it, look for a few seconds, maybe read the label, maybe take a photo, and then move on. But for most of history, that was not the main question. People did not make art only so that someone could stand in a quiet room and decide whether it was beautiful. For most of history, art had a job. A painting could protect a family's reputation. A church fresco could show devotion to God. A portrait could prove power. A cathedral could make a whole city feel chosen, important, and eternal. Art was not just decoration. It was a public statement. It was a promise. Sometimes it was even a weapon. So maybe the real question is not, why is this painting famous? Maybe the better question is, what was this artwork trying to do? Let's start in Renaissance Florence. Imagine you are a wealthy merchant in the 1400s. You made your money from wool, banking, or trade. You are rich, but Florence is a republic, and people are suspicious of families that look too powerful. You want your name to survive. You want people to trust you. You want your family to be seen as honorable, religious, and important. So what do? You commission art. Maybe you pay for a chapel. Maybe you pay for a fresco inside a church. Maybe you place your family name, your coat of arms, or even your own face near a sacred scene. To us, this may look like beauty. But at the time, it was also a message. It said, we belong here. We serve God. We are rich enough to give something permanent to the city. And the cost mattered. A cheap statement is easy to ignore. But a fresco inside a church, made by a great artist, using expensive materials, in a public place, was harder to dismiss. The artwork was the message, and the cost was part of the message. That is why old art often feels so serious. It was not made for a quick glance. It was made to survive. It was made to speak for a family, a city, or a belief system long after the people who paid for it were gone. Now think about Florence's most famous symbol, the dome of Santa Maria del Fiore. Today, we see it as a beautiful landmark. But when Florence built it, it was much more than architecture. It was a challenge. The city had started building a cathedral with a huge space that needed to be covered by a dome. The problem was, nobody really knew how to build a dome that large. It was an engineering problem, a political problem, and almost a spiritual problem. Because if Florence could finish it, the city would be saying something very powerful. We can do what other cities cannot. We can solve the impossible. We are not just rich. We are chosen, skilled, and great. So Brunelleschi's dome was not only a roof. It was Florence speaking to the world. It was the city saying, look what we can do. That is one reason old art and architecture can feel so powerful. They were connected to real stakes. A family's honor, a city's identity, a ruler's legitimacy, a church's authority. The artwork had to work in public. People had to understand it. This is very different from how we often experience art today. Today, art is often separated from daily life. It is placed in museums, behind glass, with a small label beside it. But in the past, art was often inside the life of the city. It was in churches, on public buildings, in palaces, in streets, in homes. It was part of how people understood who they were. Now let's move north, to the Dutch Republic in the 1600s. This is one of the most interesting moments in art history. The Dutch Republic was small. It did not have a king like France. It did not have a pope like Rome. It did not have the same traditional court culture that shaped art in many other places. And yet it produced Rembrandt, Vermeer, Frans Hals, Ruysdael, and many others. Paintings were everywhere, not only in palaces. They were in ordinary homes, shops, and public spaces. So what was happening? Dutch painting was not only about royal power or church glory. It was about a society looking at itself. A milkmaid pouring milk. A merchant in his home. Ships at sea. A quiet street. A table with fruit, silver, bread, and glass. At first, these subjects can look small, but they were not small to the people who lived inside that world. The Dutch Republic was a commercial society. People were used to looking carefully. A merchant had to judge fabric, weight, quality, light, texture, and value. That same kind of careful looking appears in Dutch painting. A Vermeer interior is quiet, but it asks you to notice everything. The light on the wall, the texture of the bread, the shine of a jug, the silence between people. Dutch paintings mattered because they showed people the world they actually lived in. They gave visual form to a society without a king. A society built around trade, homes, discipline, attention, and daily life. So again, art had a job. It helped a community recognize itself. It said, "This is our world. This is what we value. This is what our life looks like when someone really pays attention." This is why the usual museum question, "Do I like it?" is too small. A better question is, what kind of world made this painting necessary? Because old art was usually answering a problem. How does a rich family prove it deserves respect? How does a city show its greatness? How does a church make the invisible feel visible? How does a ruler make power look natural? When you ask that question, museums become much more interesting. You stop looking only for beauty. You start looking for function. But then something changes. In the modern world, art slowly becomes separated from these old jobs. Photography takes over some of painting's role. If you want a realistic image of a person, a camera can do it faster. Industry changes cities. Religion becomes less central in public life. Patronage changes. The old shared symbols begin to weaken. And art moves more and more into galleries, salons, and museums. At the same time, the artist becomes more independent. That sounds like freedom, and it is. But it also creates a new problem. If the old shared language is gone, what should art do now? This is one reason modern art can feel confusing. Modern artists were not just trying to be strange. Many of them were working after the old system had broken. Before, a painting could rely on shared symbols. A saint had meaning. A crown had meaning. A church had meaning. A mythological scene had meaning. People did not always need long explanations because they shared the basic code. But modern artists often had to invent their own code. They had to ask, what is painting after photography? What is music after traditional harmony? What is architecture after ornament? What is literature after old stories stop feeling believable? So modern art becomes more self-conscious. Painting starts asking what painting is. Music starts asking what sound is. Architecture starts asking what function is. This can produce great works, but it can also make art feel distant from ordinary people. Because if every artist invents a new language, the viewer has to learn a new language every time. That is why many people walk into a modern gallery and feel lost. It is not always because they are stupid. Often, it is because the shared world between artist and viewer has disappeared. Old art was not always easy, but it often had a shared purpose. Modern art often has freedom, but less shared ground. And that changes the experience completely. Think about a Gothic cathedral. You do not need to know every detail to feel that it is trying to lift your eyes upward. The height, the light, the stone, the stained glass, the figures, the rhythm of the space. Everything works together. It creates a world. You can walk inside it. You can feel its rules. The building tells your body where to look, where to move, when to stop, when to look up. That is very different from standing in front of an object in a white gallery and reading a wall text that explains why it matters. In a cathedral, the meaning surrounds you. In a modern gallery, the meaning often has to be explained. That does not mean old art is always better, but it does mean old art often had a stronger connection between object, place, audience, and purpose. And maybe that is what we miss. Not only beauty, but shared meaning. A world where the artwork was connected to something larger than the artist alone. God. The city, the republic, the dynasty, the family, the future. Something beyond the individual. That may be why old art can still feel powerful even when we do not fully understand it. We sense that it was made for something. It was carrying weight. It was part of a larger system of belief, power, fear, hope, and identity. So where did that energy go? Maybe it did not disappear. Maybe it moved. Today, some of the biggest shared worlds are not only in churches or palaces. They are in films, video games, digital communities, cities, online spaces, even AI-generated worlds. A video game, for example, can create a full world with rules, symbols, challenges, and shared experiences. Millions of people can understand the same visual language, the same characters, the same maps, the same emotional moments. That may sound far from Renaissance art, but in one way, it is closer than we think. Because it gives people a world to inhabit, not just an image to look at. The old cathedral did that. The old fresco cycle did that. A great city did that. And maybe new media are trying to do that again. The form changes. The need remains. Humans still want shared worlds. We still want images that explain who we are. We still want stories that feel bigger than one person. We still want symbols that make our fears, hopes, and identities visible. So the next time you enter a museum, don't only ask, "Do I like this painting?" Ask, "What was this artwork for? Who paid for it? Who was meant to see it? What did it want people to believe? What problem was it trying to solve? Was it proving power, creating memory, teaching faith, building identity, showing status, making fear visible? Making a city feel eternal?" Because once you ask that, paintings stop being silent objects on a wall. They become evidence. Evidence of what people loved, what they feared, what they worshipped, what they wanted others to remember. Art was not always decoration. It was how people made meaning public. And when you know what to look for, a museum stops being a room full of old images. It becomes a room full of human problems, still speaking, centuries later.